There's a specific kind of silence that fills a courtroom when a family destroys itself in real time. I experienced it firsthand when my physician brother stood before a judge using medical terminology to convince everyone I'd lost my mind. My mother and father sat behind him, dabbing designer handkerchiefs against crocodile tears, playing their parts flawlessly. What they didn't know? The small device pressing against my ribs was recording every lie, and in exactly 8 minutes, their entire scheme would unravel in the most spectacular way possible. They made one critical miscalculation. They assumed the family scapegoat would stay silent forever. Before I reveal how 3 members of my own bloodline attempted to chemically incapacitate me, forge my signature, and institutionalize me for life to access a multi-million-dollar fortune, and how I brought them down using nothing but careful planning and one hidden recording device, show your support by hitting that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of calculated justice, and comment below with your location. I want to know where my truth seekers are watching from. Let's rewind to where this nightmare truly began. Picture an old Southern library, rich mahogany panels absorbing sound, leather-bound books standing guard along the walls, the scent of aged paper and expensive tobacco lingering in the air. This was where fortunes changed hands in my family, where destinies were written in legal language and witnessed by men in expensive suits. My grandfather's attorney adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles and cleared his throat. The manila folder before him contained words that would fracture our family forever. To my granddaughter, Vivian Laurent, I bequeathed the entirety of the Charleston estate, including all structures, grounds, collections, and holdings, valued at approximately $15 million. Time stopped. My brother Marcus, a cosmetic surgeon with a God complex and a gambling problem, froze mid-breath. My mother, Elena's perfectly manicured hand suspended in midair. My father, Richard's complexion shifted through a spectrum of colors I didn't know human skin could achieve. You need context to understand why this moment detonated like a bomb. I was never meant to inherit anything. In our family's carefully constructed hierarchy, I was the shadow, the artistic failure living in the converted guest house, the daughter who chose paints and canvas over prestige and power. Marcus was the son, brilliant, charming, accomplished, the legacy child. From childhood, I existed as his emotional dumping ground. When he underperformed in university, I was blamed for being distracting. When he wrecked his luxury vehicle while intoxicated, somehow I had provoked his stress earlier that week. I was the designated failure, positioned specifically so he could appear successful by contrast. But my grandfather understood the truth. He recognized that Marcus wasn't building success. He was hemorrhaging money through offshore sports betting and underground poker games, covering his tracks with a successful medical practice facade. The estate in Marcus's hands would be auctioned off within days to satisfy debts. So, grandfather gave everything to me. When the attorney departed, the masks came off. Elena's tears evaporated instantly. She turned toward me with an expression I can only describe as predatory. "Vivian, your brother is facing serious financial difficulties. Dangerous individuals are involved. We must liquidate the estate immediately. It's about protecting our family legacy." I looked at the 3 of them, my parents flanking Marcus like guards, and something inside me finally snapped into clarity. I had never been their daughter. I had been their tool. "I'm not selling," I said quietly. "I'm converting the main house into a residential art therapy center for women escaping financial and psychological abuse." The oxygen seemed to vanish from the room. Richard's face contorted. Elena's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Marcus laughed, a sharp, cruel sound devoid of humor. You'd give our ancestral property to complete strangers rather than help your own brother? I held his gaze without flinching. Those strangers deserve sanctuary. You deserve accountability. That sentence started a war. By refusing my assigned role, by rejecting the script where I sacrificed myself to save the golden child, I became something far more threatening to them. I became the obstacle. As I left that library, I understood they wouldn't simply accept defeat. They would retaliate. I underestimated how far they'd go until I discovered the evidence in my workspace 3 days later. My studio was my sanctuary, a converted carriage house filled with north-facing windows, the smell of oils and solvents, decades of creative work layered on every surface. That Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. The door was unlocked when it should have been secured. The air smelled wrong, metallic, chemical, disturbing. My current restoration project, a family portrait of my grandfather I'd spent half a year carefully reviving, was destroyed on the floor. Not damaged, annihilated. The canvas had been systematically shredded with a blade, precise diagonal cuts creating a web of destruction. Crimson paint had been hurled across the entire piece, pooling on the floor, splashed across the walls in patterns that mimicked arterial spray. It looked exactly like a violent crime scene. My keys bit into my palm. My chest constricted. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a declaration. Vivian. The voice emerged from the shadows near my supply closet. This is what happens when you lose control. Marcus stepped into the light, wearing his pristine medical coat, his expression arranged in practiced concern, but his eyes were empty, calculating. I warned Mother and Father you were deteriorating, but they didn't want to acknowledge it. This kind of violent destruction, these aggressive episodes, the diagnosis is quite clear. My blood turned to ice water. Leave now. I wish I could. Unfortunately, I've already contacted the authorities for your protection. That's when I heard them approaching. Sirens cutting through the humid afternoon, emergency lights painting the studio walls red and blue. Marcus walked calmly to the entrance and opened it wide. Officers, thank you for responding so quickly. Please be cautious. My sister has stopped taking her prescribed medications. She's having a severe episode. 2 uniformed officers entered, assessing the scene with trained eyes. They saw the destroyed artwork. They saw the red paint mimicking blood. They saw me, standing there, trembling, hands stained, looking exactly like someone who experienced a psychotic break. Marcus was the respected medical professional, the trusted community figure. I was the eccentric artist who lived alone. The story wrote itself before I could speak a word. Ma'am, we need you to come with us for evaluation, one officer stated, moving closer. A scream built inside me like a living thing, hot, desperate, violent. Every instinct demanded I defend myself, point at Marcus, force them to see the truth. But in that crystalline moment, I understood. This was the trap. If I screamed, I confirmed his narrative. If I fought, I became the unstable woman he needed me to be. To strangers, a woman hysterically accusing her doctor brother of framing her sounds exactly like paranoid delusion. Marcus was betting everything on my emotional reaction, so I gave him something he never anticipated: complete silence. I closed my mouth, emptied my expression, became stone. When the officer reached for my arm, I turned and extended my wrists voluntarily. I watched Marcus's confident smile falter. He wanted a scene. He needed me to perform my breakdown. I gave him nothing. A psychiatric hold is designed to strip you bare, remove your autonomy, test your stability under fluorescent lights and institutional procedures. They confiscated everything: my phone, my shoelaces, my watch, my dignity. The room was deliberately oppressive: buzzing lights, industrial cleaning chemicals, a bed that had held countless other desperate people. Medical professionals cycled through every few hours. Standard questions: are you hearing voices, experiencing paranoid thoughts about family members, having suicidal ideations? I answered each question with calm precision. I ate the terrible food without complaint. I meditated on that uncomfortable bed. I treated incarceration not as punishment, but as strategy. Because I recognized something Marcus didn't. Silence wasn't capitulation, it was warfare. Every hour I remained composed was another crack in his fabricated story. Every measured response contradicted his claims of instability. My attorney, Sierra, extracted me within hours of the mandatory hold expiring. She arrived armed with my complete medical history, showing zero psychiatric treatment, no medication prescriptions, no history of mental health intervention, and a promise to pursue legal action against the facility for unlawful detention. The doctors, finding me disturbingly sane, released me immediately. When I emerged into daylight, I anticipated another attack, more legal maneuvers, additional accusations. Instead, I found my parents waiting on my doorstep, and their performance was absolutely masterful. Elena wore cotton instead of silk. Her face was bare of makeup, making her appear vulnerable, aged, authentically distressed. Richard stood behind her with shoulders slumped, holding a casserole dish like an offering. The scene was so perfectly staged it felt surreal. "Vivian," Elena whispered as I approached. She collapsed to her knees on the gravel pathway, seizing my hand. "We had no idea he would go that far," she sobbed. "We thought he was genuinely concerned about your well-being. When we discovered he'd called the police, when we saw what he did to your studio—" She looked up, tears streaming authentically down her face. "Marcus lied to us. He told us you were having psychiatric episodes, that you were threatening self-harm. We were terrified for you." Richard moved forward, voice heavy with remorse. "We've been blind, Vivian. We allowed him to manipulate us because we wanted to believe in his success. But we finally see him clearly. We see what he's become." I studied them carefully. The tears appeared genuine, the body language read as authentic remorse. And part of me, the part still hoping for parental love, desperately wanted to believe them. "We want to make amends," Elena continued. "Please join us for dinner Sunday evening, just family. We're going to confront Marcus directly. We're removing him from the family trust and cutting off all financial support. We want you present to witness it. We want to rebuild." "Sunday," I repeated slowly. "Yes, a reconciliation dinner. Please, Vivian, allow us the opportunity to be the parents you deserved all along." I looked at the mansion behind them, beautiful, imposing, filled with generations of family secrets. This was an elegant trap, but traps only function when the prey doesn't recognize them. "All right," I agreed quietly. "I'll be there." Elena wept with relief. Richard nodded, looking genuinely grateful. They departed, promising my favorite meal and a fresh start. As their vehicle disappeared down the drive, coldness settled into my bones. Their performance was flawless, almost believable. Almost. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I was an artist. I'd spent my entire life studying layers, examining brushstrokes, identifying the subtle differences between authenticity and forgery. The tears were real, but the timing was too convenient. Marcus was their investment, their retirement security, their social status. They wouldn't discard him because he'd gotten too aggressive with me. They'd only abandon him if he was costing them money. And currently, I was the one blocking their access to funds. I returned to my studio and retrieved a small antique jewelry box. Inside was a vintage brooch I'd purchased from an estate sale years prior, an elaborate piece with a large center stone. But I hadn't bought it for its beauty. Behind the central diamond was a high-definition camera lens. Embedded in the metalwork was a microphone capable of capturing whispered conversations across a room. If they wanted dinner, I would attend, not as their victim, as their documentarian. Sunday arrived with oppressive humidity that made breathing feel like drowning. I penned the brooch over my heart, the camera lens invisible, the microphone silent. The drive to the family estate felt like approaching an execution. Elena greeted me at the entrance with an embrace that felt like a performance. "Darling, I'm glad you're here." The dining room was arranged like a scene from Gothic theater. Heavy silverware, bone china, crystal stemware catching chandelier light like tiny trapped stars. And there, seated in his customary position, completely relaxed, was Marcus. Obviously. My stomach dropped through the floor. "Vivian," he exclaimed, standing with a broad smile. "Wonderful to see you looking so well." The condescension was palpable. My parents acted as though nothing was unusual. No confrontation, no removal from the trust, no accountability, just pleasant conversation and free-flowing wine. Richard personally poured my glass, deep red liquid from the family cellar. "To new beginnings," he announced, raising his glass. I lifted mine toward my lips and caught the scent. Not wine, something else underneath. Sweet, almost nutty, reminiscent of bitter almonds. Chemical. Sedative. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought the brooch might detach. They weren't reconciling, they were neutralizing. I brought the glass to my mouth, let the liquid touch my tongue, then jerked forward with a convincing cough, spitting the wine into my napkin as though choking. "Sorry," I gasped. "Went down wrong." Elena patted my shoulder. "Careful, sweetheart." I set the glass aside. They watched me like predators watching wounded prey, waiting. I picked at my food, let my speech pattern shift slightly, words coming slower, less precise. "I'm feeling strange, a bit dizzy." Elena and Richard exchanged a meaningful glance. "Perhaps you should rest, dear." "No, I'm fine, just tired." I allowed my body to sag, let my head droop forward, let them believe their chemical solution was working. Marcus leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Is she unconscious?" "Nearly. Next minute." I controlled my breathing, slow, steady, deep, kept my eyelids heavy but not completely closed. Through my lashes, I observed everything. Elena produced a leather folder containing legal documents. Marcus pulled a notary seal from his jacket pocket. Once we have her signature on the power of attorney documents, we can initiate the mental incompetence proceedings tomorrow. The conservatorship will be uncontested. "And the property?" Marcus asked. "Liquidated within 7 days." Elena responded. "We'll settle your gambling obligations, auction the art collection, and divide the remainder equally." "What about her long-term?" Richard shrugged with chilling indifference. "Extended care facility, somewhere isolated, somewhere she won't create additional problems." Internally, I was completely conscious, completely aware, completely recording every single word. The brooch over my heart captured everything in high-definition clarity. I waited until Richard reached for my hand to force my signature. Then I opened my eyes. I didn't swallow it. The room became a freeze frame. Marcus's face drained of color. Elena dropped the document folder. I stood, steady, clear-eyed, completely in control, and removed the brooch from my dress. High-definition camera, professional-grade audio equipment. Every word you've spoken in the last 30 minutes is recorded, time-stamped, and automatically uploaded to cloud storage. Richard lunged towards me. I stepped backward. Don't. My attorney already has complete access. If I fail to check in within 60 minutes, the entire recording goes directly to the district attorney's office. Marcus's hands trembled visibly. This isn't... It absolutely is. I walked towards the exit, paused at the threshold, and looked back. You all believed I was weak. You thought I was the designated victim you could sacrifice to protect yourselves, but you overlooked something fundamental. I smiled without warmth. Victims don't stay silent forever. Eventually, they return with evidence. Sitting among their expensive possessions and elaborate lies, knowing their entire world was about to collapse. The legal proceedings happened faster than expected. Marcus filed an emergency conservatorship petition, claiming I posed a danger to myself and others. My parents supported his testimony with practiced emotional displays. Elena cried on the witness stand, describing how desperately she loved me, how concerned she'd been. Richard detailed the destroyed studio as evidence of violent mental instability. Marcus, wearing his medical coat-like armor, calmly explained my supposed long-documented history of psychiatric problems. The judge listened attentively, nodded with apparent sympathy, and I sat in silence while they systematically destroyed my credibility. Then Sierra stood. "Your Honor, I have one final exhibit to present." She handed the bailiff a USB drive. The courtroom screen flickered to life. And there it was. Sunday dinner in perfect audio and visual clarity. Their voices filled the formal courtroom. Once we have her signature on the power of attorney documents, we can initiate the mental incompetence proceedings tomorrow. We'll liquidate within 7 days. Extended care facility, somewhere she won't create additional problems. The judge's expression transformed from sympathy to shock to barely contained fury. Marcus shot to his feet. "That's fabricated. She manipulated that recording. This is..." "Your Honor," Sierra interrupted smoothly, "we also have this." A second video appeared. Security camera footage from my studio, date and timestamped. Marcus, alone, methodically destroying the portrait, slashing the canvas with deliberate precision, throwing paint to create the violent scene, staging everything. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. The judge stared at Marcus, then at my parents, then at me. "Ms. Laurent," she said slowly, "you have my deepest apology." She denied the conservatorship immediately. Then she did something unexpected. She ordered the immediate arrest of all 3 defendants: attempted fraud, criminal conspiracy, assault with intent to incapacitate. And then came the beautiful irony. My grandfather's will contained a protection clause. If any potential heir damaged or destroyed any artwork from the family collection for personal gain, they would forfeit all inheritance rights, not just from grandfather's estate, from the entire family trust going back 3 generations. By destroying that portrait to frame me, Marcus had triggered the clause. He lost everything: trust fund, safety net, every dollar. My parents, as active co-conspirators, were removed as trustees. The family fortune was placed under independent management. And me? I kept the estate. All of it. 6 months later, I stood in the main hall of what was now the Laurent Recovery Center. The space no longer belonged to my family's toxic legacy. It belonged to the women who now called it home. Women recovering from financial abuse, psychological manipulation, family betrayal. The art studios were filled daily. The gardens, once silent and suffocating, now echoed with genuine laughter. I kept one item exactly as it had been destroyed. My grandfather's portrait, slashed, paint spattered, violated. I mounted it in the main entrance with a plaque beneath. Evidence that damage doesn't define the ending. It proves survival. Marcus now works at a strip mall cosmetic clinic, performing discount procedures, drowning in legal fees and unpaid debts. My parents sold their property and relocated to the retirement community in Arizona. They don't call, I don't answer. And me? I walk these halls each morning, surrounded by art and women who understand what it means to be underestimated, used, and discarded by people who claimed to love you, and then to rise anyway. Not through violence, not through rage, but through patience, strategy, and one perfectly executed recording. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't require shouting or destruction. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to perform the role they assigned you. It's remaining calm when they expect fracture. It's documenting truth when they expect silence. It's walking free while they collapse under the weight of their own corruption. Justice doesn't always come from the system. Sometimes it comes from the quiet person in the corner who was watching the entire time. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that deep satisfaction when truth prevailed, hit that like button now. Comment below, what's the most satisfying revenge you've witnessed? Have you ever had to stay silent and play the long game? If you want more stories about people who refused to stay victims, who transformed betrayal into victory, who made their enemies regret underestimating them, subscribe to this channel because I have plenty more stories where this came from. Thanks for watching.